Shadows of the Damned Hella Remastered is a time machine, here to take us back to a time that the modern gaming audience might find wholly unrecognizable from what we've grown familiar with now. When this romp through hell first launched back in 2011 as a linear shooter all about the action and gleefully crass humor, it fit right at home in a market where there was no shortage of similar experiences. But in 2024, it feels very much like a game from a bygone era, which can work in its favor as frequently as it can work against it.
More darkness dead ahead. At least we're
In Shadows of the Damned, you play as Garcia Hotspur, a demon hunter who must jaunt through hell in company with former demon and talking Skill Johnson in order to rescue Paula, the love of his life, who's been kidnapped by the demon lord Fleming. The story here is clearly not the focus, with the premise instead meant to serve as the platform for the game's vibes and style, two areas where it definitely isn't lacking. Irreverent, in-your-face, and as subtle as a sledgehammer in the way only a game that released at the peak of the Xbox 360 generation could have been. Shadows of the Damned ensures that its setting feels suitably atmospheric, achieving an impressive sense of place in spite of the game's general lack of narrative focus. That's not to say there's no issues to speak of in the storytelling department. In fact, some of Shadows of the Damned's most prominent issues lie in this area. The game's crude, edgy, and juvenile humor and writing were very much part of its charm back when it launched, but though they may have seemed par for the course nearly a decade and a half back, they haven't necessarily aged well. Gaming has matured as a medium, and audiences have matured as a whole as well. So while there are certainly times when some of Shadow of the Damned's jokes and humor do land, more often than not, that is not the case, which is a bit of a shame because the actual game itself is a lot of fun. And it's fun in a way that we rarely see in games in today's day and age. No, I'm not being a boomer here and telling you that games are not fun anymore. That's simply just not true. What is undeniable, however, is that game developers in general seem to be averse to simplicity these days. Games have to be multiple dozen hours long. They have to be either open world or semi-open world. They have to have layered progression mechanics and all of that jazz. This, however, is a game that came out at a time where that constant feature creep and scope creep hadn't swallowed games whole, and it shows. Shadows of the Damned is mostly linear, with levels taking you through straightforward arenas where your primary goal is to mow down hordes of demons, with some light exploration also thrown in from time to time. Progression, meanwhile, is equally no nonsense, with a limited range of upgrade options, prioritizing effectiveness over the illusion of complexity. And of course, the runtime is blessedly short. At 10 to 12 hours long, Shadows of the Damned feels perfectly paced and never overstays its welcome in the slightest. Above all else, the focus is always on the combat and little else, which means there's little to no bloat to worry about. And that is a refreshing change of pace for anyone immersed in gaming these days. Which is a good thing, because the combat here rules. Slow and deliberate movements combines with weighty and impactful action in an endlessly enjoyable combat system. Shadows of the Damned benefits massively from its core moment-to-moment mechanics being as fun as they are as much as it does from the strengths in other areas, such as enemy variety and the tight and claustrophobic design of its combat arenas. The game constantly encourages you to keep moving about the environment and make smart use of your arsenal of hellish weapons while keeping an eye on your ammo reserves, and that never quite loses its charm, especially as combat encounters start ramping up in difficulty and tension the deeper as you progress into the game. The game does sometimes suffer from a few mechanical issues, chief among them being the occasionally rough movement. In general, Shadows of the Dam's slower and tankier movement works great with the deliberate pacing of its combat, but at times its camera can feel a bit too sluggish, which is exasperated by how much it zooms into the player's back. That can be particularly frustrating during the more hectic combat encounters, like the bosses, and happens often enough for it to be a legitimate issue within the combat. Shadows of the Damned, Hella Remastered, also leaves plenty to be desired as far as its remastering efforts are concerned. The game now runs at 4K and 60 FPS, which means it looks sharper and runs smoother than ever before, which is certainly a huge boost. However, outside of that, and the addition of some bonus cosmetics and a New Game Plus mode, Hella Remastered is a fairly conservative upgrade. Whether it's technical enhancements that you're looking for, quality of life upgrades, or gameplay tweaks, Shadows of the Damned Hella Remastered doesn't tinker with its source material too much. Usually with remasters, you at least see additions such as new difficulty modes, galleries to view concept art, or what have you. But Hella Remastered does next to nothing on that front outside of its aforementioned New Game Plus mode, making it feel more like a slightly enhanced port than anything else. Thankfully, again, the core experience is still a hell of a lot of fun, so there is that. Ultimately, Shadows of the Damned Hella Remastered is worth a look for both those who enjoyed the original and are looking for an excuse to dive back into its offerings again, and those who never got a chance to play with it when it first launched and now want to see what all of the fuss is about. Close to a decade and a half on from its release, Shadows of the Damned is very much a blast from the past, thanks to its bombastic action and its lean and mean design, even if its aged writing and humor, unambitious technical upgrades, and occasionally rough movement can throw a wrench into the works from time to time. Whether it will find the audience with its remaster that it never could with its original release remains to be seen. But for our part, we're glad to have another chance to ride through madness with Garcia and Johnson again. And that'll be about it for this one. If you guys like what we're doing at Gaming Bolt, please consider subscribing to our channel, and I'll see you guys on the next video.